funny cause the rappers are posing as the gangsters while the government taking money as bonuses for bankers. In life you learn to close your eyes and hold your tongue, but together we will overcome. There's never been a chosen one.
Okay, so day 7 of the COPA trial just ended. It was another interesting day. I thought Craig did better today than yesterday. He seemed to be more relaxed, more confident than he was yesterday. I'm sure he was coached about trying to remain more calm and coached by his team on how to be just more relaxed on the stand when they're trying to irritate him. He seemed to do a much better job today. But COPA opened up by talking about inconsistencies in Craig's use of the term cryptocurrency and how he's at different times referred to Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency, while at other times kind of denigrating the term cryptocurrency and saying that he doesn't consider Bitcoin a cryptocurrency. So they kind of nitpicked at the different times that he's used the terms interchangeably or used them inconsistently. And Craig's justification for that was to say that it was after Silk Road that he made the distinction between Bitcoin and crypto, that he wanted to differentiate Bitcoin from crypto, just to emphasize that Bitcoin isn't anonymous and it's not supposed to be, whereas crypto is. They kind of talked about the private signing sessions for a little while after that. Then talked a lot. There was a lot of discussion for the morning. It ate up a good chunk of the morning talking about the Tulip Trust and the trust set up in ownership of the Tulip Trust. And yeah, they discussed sort of the assets and companies associated with the Tulip Trust and any sort of Bitcoin holdings that may exist through their corporate structure. Craig explained in detail how he wasn't a trustee and the reasoning for why he wasn't a trustee. So yeah, they kind of went into detail about why these things were set up, the way that they were set up, who set them up, why all this was done. Just kind of went over in detail everything about it. Then they got into something that they left, that they touched on right at the end of the day yesterday, which was the Genesis block. They asked Craig yesterday if he had any sort of cryptographic proof that linked him to the Genesis block. Right at the end of the day was his last question. I didn't touch on it yesterday because I figured they'd jump right into it today. It was a little bit into the morning when I got into this, but Craig essentially said that he had no cryptographic proof linking him to the Genesis block, but he sort of was held up in answering the question. He answered it in such a way that it's as if there was something else he wanted to say that he wasn't saying. Like there was something else he was holding off on saying until the right time. And today he answered more specifically about it. It was kind of a cliffhanger that they left on yesterday. So today, to jump right into that shortly after starting, it was nice. But they mentioned certain inconsistencies in him discussing the Genesis block with people and discussing what's needed to demonstrate ownership of those blocks or possession of those blocks. And he was saying that the key slices or whatever he would get access to would give him access to either 10, 11, or 12, and he stated these things at different times. And when he went into what the non-cryptographic proof was, because he did actually say there was a non-cryptographic proof, or he said something that implied there was a non-cryptographic proof if he didn't state it explicitly. But he said there was some HMAC key scheme that he could use to generate something from which he could provide a proof. And it wasn't, he was saying that it wasn't like a public key, that this particular Genesis block didn't have a typical public key because it's not a typical block, and that it has something that allows you to do what a public key does, but it's not technically like a public key. So yeah, it was a very technical explanation. It went a little bit over my head just in certain details because he was just referring to things I'm unfamiliar with, but that kind of led to another one of what I think will be one of COPA's closing arguments, where they stated that he didn't have any cryptographic proof of him controlling the Genesis block. Just the way that they said that, I suspect that's one of the closing arguments. I mean, it makes sense for it to be one of the closing arguments. And then from there, they went into his GQ interview, where he discussed why he didn't want to sign and the conditions under which he might sign. Then they talked a little bit more about business dealings, his business dealings, business holdings. Then they kind of went into lunch. After lunch, they discussed some IP movement, IP that he had to transfer. Let's see. They went into the Wired and Gizmodo leaks. So the details that were leaked by Wired and Gizmodo that outed him as Satoshi Nakamoto, they discussed that quite a bit. Then there was a lengthy discussion about the rights to Craig's life story, and apparently I didn't know this. Or I wasn't intimately familiar with any of these details. But Craig had apparently sold the rights to his life story as part of some deal, and it didn't include any details about him being Satoshi Nakamoto. And I mean, Craig justified that by saying at this time he didn't want to be known as Satoshi Nakamoto, so that's why those details weren't included. I mean, it sort of makes sense, but they tried to kind of make a bigger issue out of that than I think that really is reasonable. Let's see. Then they went into the private signing session with Gavin Andreessen, and Craig kind of understated his point about how Gavin identified him as Satoshi based on private communications that he'd had with Gavin as Satoshi, that Craig knew details about these private communications between Gavin and Satoshi, and Gavin identified him as Satoshi based on his knowledge of those private communications that only Satoshi could have. But they kind of went into all the details about the signing session with Gavin and tried to nitpick at everything. Craig did a good job of defending himself, though. It was shortly after this that Craig started to get a little emotional today. So they started talking about there not being a lot of substance to what Craig was offering and how there wasn't really anything objective that he had. I felt like that's going to be one of their closing arguments, that he's not provided any sort of real objective, conclusive evidence. The end of the day was kind of consumed by discussion about signing and how possession doesn't denote ownership and it doesn't prove identity. I mean, a lot of people have made the argument that Craig just needs to move coin and prove who he is. And I know that makes sense to a lot of people, but from a legal perspective, you have to establish yourself as the person moving that coin before it means anything. And essentially, there's a great argument that Craig made in the court today where he was saying that if he did just do that, then they would accuse him of having stolen the keys. And they would say that he'd stolen them from Dave Kleiman, his dead friend, and that Dave was actually Satoshi and that Craig was a fraud anyway. They would pretty much, no matter what he provided, that they would find some excuse to say that he's a fraud. And to be fair, I kind of think that's true. I think that's what's happening. So I'm glad that he actually came out and said that. But he was really emotional at this point, and you could tell he was getting angry. He was kind of shouting his responses. He was angry at the end of the day. I mean, I don't think that it was... I think it was actually still a better performance than yesterday from Craig, even though he was shouting. It was just like a sign of him being passionate. I mean, if I'm someone who there's a couple things I'd like to patent. I have ideas that I'd like to patent. He takes it personal. Like, he's defending something that he's created and something that's part of a piece of something he's trying to build today. So, yeah, I actually thought it reflected well on him that he was being passionate at the end of the day. But Yeah, it was an interesting day. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, it'll be another day of much of the same, I think. But yeah, I mean, the time where he's going to be on the stand is coming to a close. We're going to get some other people up. Yeah, we'll see what happens in the days to come after Craig leaves the stand. I think he's definitely on the stand again tomorrow, I think. So, yeah, we'll report back again tomorrow. So I just wanted to add at the end here that despite all of the talk today about the Genesis block, there was no mention of the coins that were moved to the Genesis block about a month before the start of the trial, the 26 or 27 Bitcoin that were sent to the Genesis block. No mention of that today by either side. Very, very strange to me. I kind of suspect that Craig may have been behind that. I mean, if it was Craig, I feel like he'd be using those coins for some sort of demonstration. I mean, my initial suspicion when I saw that happen was that it was Craig until I saw that it was from a Binance account. But I know Craig did say that he did some work involving Binance with like lots of money, trying to see how much money he could kind of funnel through Binance using different emails and accounts that were all generated from the same server. So it might be the case that he had a lot of money available at the exchange just for the sake of work that he was doing or just testing and stuff. A lot of people were of course skeptical that Craig would move that many coins through Binance. But it may have made sense at some point based on work he was doing there for him to still have coin on that exchange. If that was the case, I mean, it was shortly after that that Binance, I think they were listing some BSV ordinals on their website, and I think CoinMarketCap changed what it said about Craig being the likely creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto. It changed to saying that shortly after that happened. So someone at Binance must know. I'm sure someone went and snooped and would have seen who had done that after this happened, because it would have created so much attention. I'm sure someone would have access to that information at Binance and go looking. So, just some speculation to throw in at the end there. I don't know, just open speculation at the end. I'm curious to see if anything happens with those coins over the course of this trial. I just wanted to throw that in.